You're listening to the Boomtime Word of Mouth Marketing Podcast. For over 50 episodes, Boomtime has been the professional source for marketing information and inspiration. For more articles and episodes, visit us at boomtime.com and be sure to subscribe to the Word of Mouth Marketing Podcast on your iPhone or Android device to listen on the go. Now here's your host, JP Clement. Thank you for joining the Boomtime Word of Mouth Marketing Podcast. We're in our 8-week deep dive on your marketing funnel, and this week is week 2, the discovery portion of your funnel, and we're going to be talking about messaging, voice, and web copy. I'm Donnie Valdez. I'm a marketing strategist here at Boomtime, and I'm here with our CEO, JP Clement. And all right, so starting this off, what is the importance of a powerful brand message, JP?
Well, there's a lot of clutter out there, and as a brand, as a company, you need to have a powerful brand to be able to differentiate yourself and stand out. And so your brand message is critical, and it has to be as powerful as it possibly can be to be able to cut across that clutter that I just mentioned. So you need to be able to identify what your brand is, to be able to create a brand message. And that's an exercise that a lot of companies don't really take the time to do. There's always kind of an assumption that, they know what their brand is. But in a lot of cases, if you ask some probing questions, they don't really have a brand, or they don't really understand what their brand is. And if they do understand what their brand is, they don't really know how to manage it or really extract the most that they can out of their brand. And the brand is a pretty complex construct. It's not just your logo and your design or your colors or your typeface or your logo mark. It's a combination of a lot of different things that create a brand, and that brand also can evolve across time. And so you might be at a different part of your brand evolution than you think you are. That said, it is critical that your brand message is as powerful as possible. And the way to make it powerful is to really focus on those elements that differentiate you and that resonate with your target market. Customer brands or consumer brands do that very well. You can look around you or look on the TV or your computer screen at all times. You have some very strong brand messages from people like Apple, obviously Nike, and all the classic Coca-Cola, and all these people that have been doing brand that have honed their brand voice over dozens of years, and if not close to 100 for Coca-Cola. But you can see also as it's changed. But it's a little bit more difficult for B2C companies typically to understand how branding works and to understand what their brand is and to create that powerful brand message. But it has to resonate with your target audience. So marketing 101, right? You need to be able to talk to your audience and make sense to your audience and be attractive to your audience. And at the same time, you also need to create a message that focuses on your USP or your unique selling proposition or your and that's what becomes becomes a powerful brand message.
So you mentioned two things that I think are very important in this, and that's USP and defining your differentiators. What are some steps you can take to differentiate your company's marketing messaging? Or I'm sorry, center your messaging around your company's differentiators.
Yeah, so I think again, understanding who you are, what you do best, how you differ from the companies. We use for Boomtime, for instance, an exercise called the 3 uniques. What are the 3 things that uniquely separate us from our competitors? And we have a lot of competitors out there. So doing that for your brand is kind of a crucial exercise. That's kind of embedded in the USP, in the unique selling proposition. Unique selling proposition, which is also a great exercise to go through as a brand and as a company, is to ask yourself, what market do I serve? What do I do? Why do I do it? And how am I different or better in this case? Better is always obviously better than just being different. When I mentioned differentiation points, I was implying basically, and without being so explicit, which I should have been, that those are differentiation points that make you better from your competition, obviously. So the unique proposition is a great exercise to really focus your mind on what those three uniques are. And that exercise is really good too. Just trying to define, to really look and be very, very self-aware as a brand, as a company, that some things that you think are uniques might not be. And I'll give you a quick example of that. But that's something that actually a lot of companies don't do very well. You have to be very, very hard on yourself and make sure that the differentiators that you pick for your brand message are true differentiators. So, for instance, we I've worked with a lot of agencies in my career. I've started several agencies of my own, and very often a lot of the companies that the agencies that I've worked with, um, you ask them, okay, what differentiates you, and like, oh, we have a process, right? Well, the problem is that every single agency has a process. So yours might be unique, but the fact that you have a process doesn't make it unique. And even if it's a unique process to your company, it probably is not that unique and that different from other companies. So, differentiators are kind of a tricky one. And again, you have to be very, very disciplined in ensuring that your uniques, your differentiators are true differentiators.
Oftentimes when I'm looking at B2B websites, the homepage copy, we're talking like the hero image on a homepage, for example, doesn't quite tell me what they do. And I think that's my biggest gripe about websites in kind of SaaS or tech or any of these people that are kind of creating solutions, is that their web pages don't clearly communicate what it is they do. Do you think that messaging is important, or am I alone here?
No, you're not alone. Actually, I think that's one of the most important thing that you can do. I think the average website visit is incredibly short. It's a few seconds. If you have literally a couple seconds, well, let's call it, under 10 seconds, typically in eye tracking studies to get your message across and make sure that you are fitting in their if you are what they look your users are looking for, and what your and then becoming part of this consideration set that is so important in our marketing world. So yeah, it's critical, and it's incredibly difficult, by the way. I just want to make sure that people understand that. So I mean, having a great USP and having a clear message, being very clear about your brand message, being very clear about your uniques, as we talked about, is a great start. But that has to coalesce somehow in a very short, very pithy statement about who you are as a company, what you do, why you do it. You've heard me say in our conversations very often, we have to tell about the why of what we do, not what we do or how we do it. It's not as interesting. It doesn't. There's a ton of studies and books and written about it and TED Talks and everything. And you have to really tell people why they should be, why you are doing what you're doing. And people will buy the why, not the how, the what or the how. So uh, and the great consumer brands do that incredibly well. Again, a little bit more difficult to do typically for B2B companies, but still something that's incredibly critical. You have to be able to nail that. And it's a process. Again, you have to define your brand strategy. You have to define your unique selling proposition. You have to know sometimes your core values come into play too. That's something you might want to get across, and the words you choose and the imagery you choose to go with it, in some cases, not in all cases, but in some cases, is absolutely critical. I mean, the imagery has to be a one-to-one match for your message, and or be your message in some cases. But those two have to be, incredibly tightly woven and interrelated. And yeah, so it's again something that's a process. I mean, I've led a lot of exercises that actually get you there. We're actually are doing that with boomtime. We've created like the why of boomtime, and that's something that I think every company should be doing, period. but again, it's an exercise that needs to take place probably over several workshops to be able to get that right.
Right. So you mentioned messaging and imagery have to be consistent with your brand, and this is kind of going back to having a voice for your brand. What are some steps that businesses can take for creating and keeping a consistent brand voice?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the easiest steps is to create what's called a brand style guide or branding guidelines, and things like that. That's a kind of a classic tool that, but you have to make sure that when you do that, it encompasses all the elements that create your brand. So it's not just, again, not just the logo and a typeface or logo mark or color set, right? But it's also, it's all these things plus it's your iconography, the type of images that you use. Do you have a sound signature? Do you have a visual signature for animated video, for videos or animated videos? How do you write about yourself? And how do you talk about yourself? Is your voice colloquial or very professional? Are you irreverent or very serious? I mean, there's all kinds of things that on the way actually the words that you use for yourself are important, and how that translates also to your imagery and all of these things. So, for instance, with Boomtime, we decided to not use any stock photos or photography and to go 100% with illustration because based on our core values and our brand identity, it made more sense to actually do that. So that branding style guide, it should be an all-encompassing document that, or it could be a virtual document that really helps you create the right, the right parameters for how your brand gets translated to the external world. I've worked with branding agencies. One of the famous ones is called Landor. It's in San Francisco, and it's amazing the way they think about branding and your brand imagery and all of that is amazing. They did a project for the company I was working with at the time, but it was literally a 500-page book in the end, a coffee table style book. It's a huge book, and literally looked at every single thing that we did, including the color and the style of the outfits that people in the stores of that company I worked for at the time were wearing, whether they should wear hats or no hats. It was just insane. But it shows you like the depth, the fact that branding is a very, very complex world, and the way you present yourself and the way your branding is and the way you control your branding is multifaceted and can get very, very complicated. But also, those companies that do that kind of work and can afford to do that kind of work are the ones that stand out and the ones that customers and consumers remember.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Um, so I guess along those lines, do you think it's important to not control, but to maybe influence or inspire how your employees are, speaking about your brand on social media? I guess controlling social media voice.
Yeah, totally. Your employees are part of your brand. So the way they, in some cases, I was mentioning a retail store, the way they dress and the way they interact with you is part of your brand. The experience that consumers have or customers have is part of your brand. So, that's why a lot of people have created this name called CX, right? Customer experience, and it's fully accepted as part of your brand. So yeah, so the way your employees behave in the outside to the outside world, and therefore social media, for instance, is an integral part of your brand, and it has to be managed as such. So you have to be able to set some parameters as a company around how people communicate, what they communicate about, how they come across, and have some policies in place to make sure that that's done correctly. So yeah, some brand style guides include communication policies.
That's interesting because a lot of what we do is LinkedIn marketing. And so a lot of times you're not even going to see these private messages that are being sent maybe from a salesperson to a prospect. and just kind of having that general awareness for them to use as a rule of thumb is pretty important.
Yeah, definitely. But again, that's why the tone of voice, the kind of wording that you use, the kind of language that you use, the style of the tone, basically, of your voice is pretty critical and is part of your branding. And at Boomtime, by the way, we do have that. We have a whole section in our branding style guide about how we talk about ourselves and how we communicate to the external world.
That's awesome. Getting back to web copy and what we were talking about in the first part with messaging, how do you approach, say, homepage copy versus landing page copy?
Very differently. We focus. You have to focus, I think, in general, but we do that, and we do that for our clients too. You have to focus on buyers' journeys or personas. I mean, the two can be, you know, switch one another, or they can be separate. But those are very critical, and so typically, in a buyer's journey, the homepage is not really where you want to lead people to, because it's going to have to capture a lot of different buyers' journeys and personas. It's kind of your catch-all. So the best practice is to actually drive your target audience to specific landing pages that address either like a specific need, a specific industry, vertical, or pain point that your customers might have, and drive them there. And so therefore, by definition, the copy, the imagery on that page, the lead capture tools that you use, and all of that, the engagement, tips and tricks that you can use there, are going to have to be very, very different from the homepage. They're going to have to be way more focused, way more specific, and uh, uh, less vague, if you want, less of a catch-all, and be able to really do their job, which is to capture leads and to get your people to the next step of the funnel, or the next step of the buyer's journey in this case.
Right, and getting them to the next step is super important. We're going to talk more about all of this stuff in our week 4, which is our conversion section. But I do kind of want to talk about not only CTAs, but internal links within your site, like how people or how buyers experience the buyer's journey, how they navigate around the site and to different parts of the funnel. I think it's very important to communicate clearly an expectation of what they will find on the other side of a button, for example. Like instead of read more, tell them that it's your blog for your specific industry, or have some sort of purpose behind each button.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's one of my pet peeves actually in UX and as it relates to getting people through your funnel and through their buyer's journeys. I've worked on a lot of that, and my take on that is that you really have to set expectations correctly and to kind of give as much of a preview to your users as to what they're going to get if they click on that button, or fill that form, or use your navigation to go to a different page. And so calls to action to me have to be very specific, very to the point, but at the same time they need to be able to tell people what you're going to be if I click on this button, this is exactly what's going to happen, as much as you can within the space of the button. Same thing with your with your nav bar in a website. You need to tell people in their nav bar, if they click on that element of the nav bar, where they're going to go and what they should expect to find there. So you've heard me say probably a couple of times that I really like this new trend of using calls to action in your navigation. So instead of saying about us, so learn about how we work, right? Or I suppose it's have services, find out more about our services, or purchase a service from us, or depending on how your website is set up. But use those action calls to really tell people, hey, this is what you're going to be doing there, this is what you're going to be seeing there. That's very, very important. Very often website designers, especially, tend to forget that, when people come, especially when they're early in the buyer's journey and at the top of the funnel, you need to be able to, you need to set those expectations. You need to guide them. You need to hold their hand. And CTAs in buttons the way your nav bar is shaped, anything you can do to really basically take them from one page to another, or one step of the buyer's journey to another, one section to another, and guide them through that by holding their hand and telling them exactly what they're going to see or do when they get there is super critical. To wrap it up, it sounds a little bit like, this is a lot of things that are, and everything seems critical, but in a weird way, all these things are critical. It's so easy to start taking someone through a buyer's journey and through your funnel, and to lose them, right? There's plenty of opportunities, actually. There are more opportunities to lose them at any given point than to take them to the next step. And so you have to put all these things in place to make sure that you can answer their needs and walk them through that buyer's journey in a very seamless and powerful way. This is and there's no more silver bullet. The world is a way more complicated place today than it used to be even 10 years ago or 5 years ago. And that world, the complexity of that world, was very apparent, I think. And when I say that world, that marketing world, that marketplace of products and services and ideas, that used to be much more easily navigated a few years ago. The complexity that people were seeing in the B2C space has translated now to the B2B space. And there are so many different ways to talk to potential buyers, to lead people to sales funnel. There's tools, there are tactics, techniques, different ways, different places you can do it. It's incredibly complicated. And so as a result of that, our customers and our users have so many opportunities to basically check out. And you obviously don't want that to happen. You want to be able to nurture those leads, get them down the funnel. And to do that, you have to make sure that every single step is incredibly tightly managed.
Well, thank you, JP. This is week 2 of our 8-week deep dive into your marketing funnel. Next week, we are going through the consideration phase. And thank you for attending the Boomtime Word of Mouth Marketing Podcast. We'll see you next time.
See you next time. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Boomtime Word of Mouth Marketing Podcast. For more episodes and to learn more about us, check us out at boomtime.com.